Hello everyone and welcome to This Nintendo Life episode 178. My name is NBZ. I'm your host here today, and I'm doing alright. I don't know, I've got nothing interesting to say at the start of the show. Always trying to come up with some sort of anecdote, some sort of way to chime into it, but sometimes there's nothing, and then you just get me just talking to myself.
Are we in autumn or summer?
I don't know, Bally. It's kind of hard to tell. It is quite bright outside at the moment, so you would think that the dregs of summer are kind of like clawing their way to stay in vogue, but I think we are fast approaching some cold season. I was having a barbecue yesterday and was outside late at night, and it was chilly. So I'm not really thinking that it's staying for that long. How's it going in Edinburgh?
I thought we were going to have another couple of heat waves, and they've not come yet, so...
Yeah, well, time is running out for that, and maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. But you know what will always happen? Video games. That's right, we're here with video games, and we're going to talk about them and stuff like that. So people listening to this show have probably realised, the Nintendo news, that there's a giant Mario collection coming out of Bally. It's the Mario 3D All-Stars, and we are, of course, going to talk about that on this show later on. But we wanted to announce that we are going to be doing a special feature regarding these games. Do you want to tell folks what we're doing, Bally?
Yes, so obviously the collection is coming out September 18th, I think the date is, and it will be Mario 64, Super Mario Sunshine, and Super Mario Galaxy. And we're going to play all three games and talk about them in depth, go deep. So we're going to talk about Mario 64 in the month of October. And then November, we're going to be talking about Super Mario Sunshine. And then because of Game of the Year, we're going to delay our Super Mario discussion until the start of 2021 in January. So each month, we're going to have one show dedicated to discussing those games, and we're going to go deep on them. So we're looking forward to starting Mario 64 when that collection comes out later this week.
Absolutely, and we would also like to hear your experiences with these games, whether from back when you were younger and played them, or whether you're playing them now for the first time, your impressions, your thoughts on the Mario games, so you can send those to our email address, which Bally will tell you right now, and I'm sure we'll remind you throughout the show. Bally, what's the email address?
Please email thisnintendolife@gmail.com. That is thisnintendolife@gmail.com. We'll also have a thread on our Discord server where you can leave a comment about those games.
Absolutely. So that's going to be a fun time. I'm looking forward to it. It's been so long since I played Mario 64, and hey, maybe I'll give Sunshine a fair shot. Unlikely, but I'll give it a shot regardless.
That game's got some good stuff in it, as much as there is some pretty not good things about it.
Look, I shit on Sunshine a lot. There's a lot of good elements to Sunshine, so I'm sure we'll get into it. Anyway, this is the show. We're talking about Nintendo and video games and stuff. Bally, what's the layout? What's the lay of the land today?
First segment, we're going to talk about the games that we have been playing. Second segment, we've got some emails. And then third segment, the Mario 35th anniversary YouTube video was dropped. So we're going to talk about that and the announcement of... what's it called? Calamity?
Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity.
Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity rolls off the tongue beautifully. So we're going to talk about those announcements in the third segment.
Absolutely. Let's kick things off with the games we've been playing. Bally, recently there was an indie direct that had a bunch of shadow drops, one of which was A Short Hike, a game that I played earlier this year and is delightful and I thoroughly enjoyed, and you picked it up when that happened and you've now played it.
Yeah, this was one game that was sort of only on PC for quite a while, came out last year, and it was very frustrating because I was like, I really want to play that. It looks incredible, and people were saying it's like Breath of the Wild, it's like Animal Crossing, it's a really short experience. I was like, oh, it just sounds awesome. And the idea of having a very small, short open world game seems fairly unique and hasn't been done a ton, and this got reviewed really well at the time, so I was really excited to play with this one, pick it up. So I picked it up on Switch after that indie direct, and I think it holds true to the idea of being like a Breath of the Wild mini. Like, I think the idea that you always have... The aim of the game is to climb to the top of a mountain. You need to get a phone signal to make a phone call with your mother. And you play as this bird who... called Claire, I think her name is. And
yeah, I believe so.
She has the ability to climb and glide. And
She's a bird, yeah. She
And
is.
she's a
All
bird.
the characters in these games are anthropomorphic animals, basically.
Yes.
That's where the Animal Crossing comparison comes in. Although there's also other weird comparisons, like the shovel is like the same in terms of like you can dig things up and stuff like that.
Right. But I think the mechanic that feels the most Breath of the Wild like is the fact that instead of having shrines that reward you with more health and the ability to climb higher, you basically are finding feathers in the world, and sometimes you pay for them with money, sometimes you find them in the world, sometimes you do a task for someone to gain feathers, and the feathers, similar to the rewards for completing shrines, actually give you the ability to climb higher and open the world up more to you. So this idea that the more feathers you gain, the more open and easy the world is to explore, feels very much like Breath of the Wild. By the start of the Breath of the Wild, you feel like, oh, I can barely climb anything, and the world feels overwhelming, and how am I ever going to get up there, sort of thing. And as you play more and more of that game, you can traverse the world more easily and faster, and that's a real feeling this game has in spades, on top of the fact that you can glide from a high point to a lower point, just like that game as well. So it conveys that in a really small, awesome setting. And because it feels like almost all the side quests more or less lead to more feathers. It's not like there's a ton of other collectibles. It feels like most of the collectibles link up in some way to gaining more feathers. And I think there's 20 feathers in the whole game. I only ended up with like 12 or 13 by the end. So there's definitely like others I could have explored further and gained. But I think the game does a really good job of telling you, right, your main aim is to get to the top of the mountain, and there's arrows pointing like that. This is the way to that path, and you'll always bump into these signs that tell you about where everything is, because there's no map in this game, and I think that's a really interesting decision. And I'm glad they made that decision, because I think the world is very small in the sense that I think it would kind of remove a little bit of the magic, I would argue, with a game like A Short Hike, if it did have a map that just kind of, because I think it would make the game feel smaller than it actually is. And I think that hiding it kind of makes it feel a bit more mysteriously large and more ominous.
It can get a little tricky. There's one side quest in particular I remember of someone who has lost something, and they are down in this little crevice in this kind of, I don't know, this part of the mountain.
They lost their running headband.
No, there's one person who's lost their running headband, but there's another person who has lost another item, and they're kind of down in this kind of crevasse area with like among trees and stuff, like in a little corner where they're camping. And I remember being like, oh, okay, they lost the thing. Then I find it later on. I'm like, oh, but where exactly were they? So like trying to go back to certain NPCs can be a little tricky. So that's where I'd say maybe it'd be nice to have even just like waypoints or something that could point you towards. But then again, I also think that takes away somewhat from exploration. So it's a tricky one to balance. I think it's hard to make it so that you can have the complete freedom of going anywhere and not knowing where anything is, but internalizing it. But sometimes it gets a little tricky, but you know.
Yeah, and I think overall the game does do a pretty good job, where the more I was traversing the world, because you are climbing a mountain, you're almost running rings around the lowest tier of the mountain initially, and then there's a second tier, and then almost like a final tier. It's like a 3-tier cake, really. And I found that the more I was kind of running around an area, I'd be like, oh yeah, and that's where that links to this, and okay, right, the world's coming together. And the more that feathers I was gaining, the faster and higher I was able to climb. I did get much more, and because this game works best in like 1 or 2 settings, so like hopefully the world is quite fresh in your mind whenever you're playing the game. So I think the game actually does a really good job of saying, here's the path to progress, like the main narrative, as it were, to get up the mountain. But also you could go to this other place or this other place and, meet some more characters, see if they've got a mini side quests that you can go on to get more feathers and that sort of thing. So the game does a really good job of like making those clear choices, and you will always like meet a character who says, oh yeah, you actually need this number of feathers to get up this point. I think it starts at 3, and then I think it's 7, and then I think to beat the game you probably need maybe 10, 11, 12. I don't really know, but it's clear that it is gated, and I think that works well to say, all right, I'm going to come back to this point, but in the meantime I'm going to go off and get some more feathers. And that's that sense of just open world exploration. I can do whatever I want to gain these feathers. Like, I don't have to gain a feather by doing this thing. I could try this other thing. And I think the game does a really good job of just giving you options, and it's just a really great experience in that sense. It genuinely does feel like a mini Breath of the Wild game, and I can't emphasize that enough. That's the main reason I just love this game. And I should say the setting is great. It's very warm, it's very charming, and the animals really are very fun to interact with. And I do think
there's some good writing in there. Definitely kind of short stuff, but it works pretty well.
And I think the art style is very distinct. So you have 4 different choices in terms of how chunky these pixels are, and I kind of
so we should say it has a almost DS-like aesthetic, right? That's kind of what they're going for.
Yeah, and I started with the chunky pixels and thought these look a bit stark. Maybe I'm gonna try it on and I tried all the settings, and honestly, the least pixelated setting was the most clear to me, but I felt it lost some of the charm in a way. So I almost
the character of the game is kind of built around that idea of having it look a little dated, right?
Right. So I purposefully put it on the most chunky. As uncomfortable as that was at first, I felt it was more in kind of the developer's image in a way, where I was like, I'd rather play this game in that way, just because it kind of fits the mood a bit more. It felt a bit stark playing it in the kind of lowest pixelated mode. So I just think overall it's an incredible game, and it's got a really nice finish that I think is fantastic. And I didn't go off in 100%. I think that would maybe take 3 to 4 hours, but even 3 to 4 hours to 100% an open world game is hello, this is so small, and I couldn't recommend this game highly enough. I came away incredibly satisfied. I think I can't emphasize enough, I had those open world feels of just this is satisfying and open, and this sense of exploration and the ability. You can climb in this game. You can't even climb in Horizon Zero Dawn, this game has aspects that feel more open world than a game like Horizon Zero Dawn, which is just ridiculous. And I couldn't recommend it highly enough for anyone who enjoys charming games, but also kind of open world games at any level, I would argue.
Great. I really loved it as well. It is definitely high up there for my favorite games that I played that didn't come out this year, technically. Even though it came out on Switch this year, it was came out last year on PC, and it seems like the Switch version is good, right? It runs pretty well and looks good.
Yeah, and there is a boat that is in this version, although I know they added it to the PC version. But one thing that's really cool about the boat is sort of the lowest tier of the mountain cake, as I described earlier. It kind of has a lot of water, and there's lots of different side quests that are kind of linked by the fact that
there's a separate area with its own mountain that you can get. It was really funny because that separate mountain area was one of the first places I went to across the sea. So when I first started the game, I was like, I'm just going to go over the sea, see what happens. And lo and behold, you find this other island, and it was the first place I went to. It was also the last place I went to in the game, because by the end I was able to reach the top of that mountain as well, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, and I think it's really cool that there's all these points linked up, and essentially they can take quite a while to swim between. So the idea that, hey, you can just go on this boat and zoom around the essentially the side quest around the bottom is quite satisfying. It's a very fun boat.
No, that seems like a good idea.
Control around that world, and they did update the PC version with the boat. So if you want to go back and check that out, if you have the PC version, it's also there. So yeah,
great.
A short hike, play it. I would highly recommend.
Fantastic. We also have both played a little bit. I played a bit more than you have of Spellbreak, which is the new battle royale mage fighting spell slinging game that came out last week, I think it was. It was announced at
third person paladins.
Yeah, kind of. I think it was announced a while ago, but it was kind of revealed in some senses at Jeff Keighley's One Night Live for Gamescom, and it reminds me a lot of Dauntless in the sense that when I played Dauntless, I played it on PC on the Epic Store, which it was exclusive to, but then it also came to Switch later, but it was also on PS4 and Xbox at the same time. And this is a similar situation. It's kind of the thing I want to see going forward with games as a service is cross-progression, cross-platform play, all that stuff, being able to play if I'm on Switch and you're on Xbox, or if you're on PS4 and I'm on PC, no matter what combination we have, it will work. it's great. It's fantastic. So that is exactly what I'm looking for. And the Switch version actually this time came out day and date with every other version, which is really good to see. I want to see more of that in the future. And I've played mostly the Switch version, and I've played mostly in handheld mode. I did play a little bit on docked this morning. And essentially, the idea is similar to most battle royales. You drop onto an island, and you have to kill everybody, and the winner is the last person standing. However, you are magicians, mages, I don't know what you want to call them, but people sorcerers, they can sling spells, and so you have like a fire spell, an ice spell, and each of them has like subcategories. So there's like each of them has a special. So the ice one is like a bow, kind of like a sniper bow, but your sub one is a kind of circular freeze ring around you, so you can freeze people in place. But also, if you decide to play as a certain class, like you can pick up any of these different elements on the map. So you can find a fire gauntlet, you can find a wind gauntlet, you can find a toxic gauntlet. But if you choose to play as one of those, you get a bonus that you wouldn't get if you just picked it up randomly. So for example, the one I've used the most is the ice one. And if you're playing as the ice class, when you shoot your bow, a giant stream of ice goes out in front of you, and you can slide on it, and it feels really good, like really good movement and momentum in this game. So you can zip around on top of that ice, and your teammates can as well if they're on the same team as you. And then you can like jump off and float in the air after it. But if you pick up an ice gauntlet on the map, when you shoot your bow, you won't get that ice kind of pathway in front of you. It's like what's his name in Incredibles? I can't remember. Frozo? I don't know.
Ozone, Frozone,
something like that.
Ice
Anyway,
Zone.
he like pushes out like ice slidey things in front of him, and that's kind of what this is. They just go on the ground instead. And so you have a mana bar that dictates all of this stuff. There's no ammo in the game because it's all magic, right? So it's all dictated by mana, and you can build up your mana by finding certain items, but this dictates your ability to float in the air as well as your ability to use your spells. So every character can kind of get around really easily. It feels really good just movement wise, and being able to look around the map. Bally, how have you found Spellbreak? I know you've not played a huge amount, but
yeah, I like it because my biggest issue with starting a game like an Apex Legends or maybe even a Fortnite is like I'm just not a shooter person. Like I've not played hours upon hours of Call of Duty and this. I'm not used to looking down sights and aiming guns and this sort of thing. So the idea that it is third person and you still have like a reticle, it just feels more my kind of like I feel like I've played more games with that similar sort of layout than I have necessarily looking down sights. So I immediately feel like I'm already a little bit more on the same level as other players rather than just getting completely sniped by, I don't know, some shooter pro, So in that sense, it did feel more open to like someone like me who's not too great at these games generally speaking. So I like that aspect, and I think it is a learning curve to like get used to the pickups. I think the tutorial is fairly oversimplified in kind of explaining all the kind of different pickups you can get, but it doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't really go in detail because one of the cool things about the game is similar to Breath of the Wild as well, in terms of like elements interacting with one another. So if you pop down a tornado and then you shoot, so the tornado is a wind power, and then you shoot fire into it, it turns into a fire tornado, right? So elements will combine with one another to create different effects. There's a toxic kind of bomb that you can throw, and you can freeze that toxic bomb and use it as a platform, and then you can use a fire on it and it will explode and do loads of damage. So all these elements, and there must be lots of different ones that have combined that people haven't figured out yet and stuff like that. I'm sure a lot of people have done experimentation, but it seems like there's a good amount of like discovery in there in terms of that stuff. And I can see them in the future being like, oh, we've added a new element to the game as a new class and stuff like that. Definitely seems like the sort of thing they would do in terms of online, ongoing games of service type deal.
Yeah, and I actually think the wild layout is pretty nice, and like the look of the game, I think it looks very Breath of the Wild like, actually. Like there's a real style to it that is for what they're going for. It's not trying to be too Fortnite-y in that sense, which is nice. It is
I mean, it's kind of it's more Fortnite than it is PUBG, but like you're always going to get that one with a more cartoonish art style generally.
It's more cartoonish, but it feels like it's not cartoonish necessarily in a copy and paste Fortnite way, which I think you could maybe argue other games kind of go after a bit more. And when when I was getting like killed by other players, I felt like it was more. I felt like I had a chance. Like I felt like, I'm in this. I've just played a little bit badly. It's not like I've been completely obliterated and I'm on my knees instantly like I often am in Apex Legends, and I don't even know where the shot has even come from, for God's sake. Like, that happens so many times.
And it's chewed through your purple armor somehow and you don't know why.
Right. So I think in that sense, I do find this a lot more rewarding, where it's like, yeah, I've got you might have your spells to shoot at me, but hey, I've got some pretty powerful spells myself to shoot back at you. So I think that, yes, the upgrades are important, but I think even your base level spells felt to me like you could not necessarily hold your own, but you could stay in the match a bit longer and try and contribute a bit more than completely getting overpowered.
It deals with Bally's number one fallibility, which is can't find a gun at the start of the game because you already have one.
I already have
right?
one, exactly. I do find that so we were playing like trios,
squads, yeah.
And I did find that the second 2 or 3 groups met up, clashed, it just felt like one Marvel's Avengers style kind of mess, like just
it was chaos,
explosions, and in that sense I can see it felt like maybe a lot of the skill was going out the window in favor of just sheer size of explosions, and it felt like there was maybe a bit more luck involved. But I think with time there's a lot more skill and depth to that kind of thing. And
I mean, you do say that, but like I was watching Lyric play some on Twitch when it had just come out, and he had like 20,000 viewers, so a lot of people, I think quite a few people have started playing this game now, and obviously like people on Twitch very good at these types of games, and there were situations where there were like 10-11 people and him and his squad were just like dancing all over them, like floating in the air with ridiculous precision and just like firing off these shots. And yeah, so I do think that there is a lot of skill there. It's just maybe when we're stuck in the chaos, we're just like, where the fuck is anything coming from? I don't know what's happening. This is a mess. I'm dead. Oh, whoops, what happened? So
yeah. And in that sense, the world also does feel fairly open compared to a game like Apex, where it is a lot more about cover and shooting and that sort of thing, whereas you're almost covering yourself with a whole hill in this game. It doesn't feel like there's a ton of defensive options necessarily. I definitely felt on the run quite a lot in the few games we played, and just kind of trying to stay in the game, really.
Yeah, and the thing that is kind of cool is every time you get into a circle, you get a quote-unquote level up, which adds an extra benefit to your class. So the ice class, for example, the opening gambit is you're kind of skidding on the ice thing. The second thing you get is you can float while you're aiming midair, so you can be in the sky, and as long as you're aiming, you'll kind of float in midair, and so you can snipe from above, which kind of leaves you a little bit vulnerable in the sky, because if you're standing still, then you are much more likely to get shot at and killed, especially if you're on the ground as well. So being in the air and moving around is really vital to this game in terms of it's actually kind of tricky to shoot. Obviously, it's very tricky to shoot a moving target versus a stationary one, so you want to be moving constantly even when you're in fights against other people, because otherwise they will take you down quite quickly. So yeah, similar to a lot of those other games, but I've really enjoyed it so far, and honestly, having played it on PC and on Switch, I actually prefer playing it on Switch, despite PC obviously looking a lot nicer and running a lot better, mainly because people on PC are really fucking good, and playing it on Switch, I can kill people much more easily, and it's a really good Switch port for what it is, which I'm not the biggest fan of Fortnite on Switch. I think it doesn't run particularly well, but I think this game runs pretty smoothly. It hits 30 for the most part. Handheld mode is definitely a bit chunkier and a little blurry, but on docked mode, it still looks pretty good and runs nicely, and there's not that many players. I believe it's 42 players in the map versus you're either 60 from Apex or you're 100 from PUBG and Fortnite. So it feels maybe like the map is maybe a little too large for that many people, and you don't come across that many people when you're playing. But yeah, it's worked really well so far, and I'm enjoying it a lot, and I think it's one that I'm gonna keep playing and keep digging into. So yeah, Spellbreak, pretty cool. Then obviously with this Mario anniversary thing happening, they announced that the Super Mario All-Stars collection, the original one for Super Nintendo, came out. And it had been a long time, Bally, since I had played Super Mario Bros. 2. because when we were younger, we played the Game Boy Advance version, otherwise known as Super Mario Advance, because everyone loves all the titles of the Mario Advance games that make total sense, right? Like Super Mario Advance 3, Super Mario Advance 4, Super Mario Brothers 3. That's my favorite one, because it's just like, what? Who was smoking some crazy shit when they decided
what was the decision? Why was there the decision we're not going to make new Mario 2D games for Game Boy Advance? Why were they so keen on remaking the old games?
I think it's because Mario is sacred, right? Even though, like, you do have original 2D games on Game Boy with Mario Land and Mario Land 2, there's something about, like, they hadn't made an original 2D Mario in going on a decade probably at that point, right? Because the last one would have been, if we're not counting Yoshi's Island, then it would have been Super Mario World, which launches with the Super Nintendo. And that's like the final Super Mario 2D original game until New Super Mario Brothers on the DS in like 2006 or whatever it was. So I think they were just a little gun shy. And also I think they wanted quick games on the GBA quickly, and they obviously had very similar architecture to the Super Nintendo, so they were like, we got a bunch of classic Super Nintendo games, let's just resell the shit out of these, and like half the GBA library is just Super Nintendo re-releases, right?
Yeah.
Like they've got...
And hey, it's like, it's a new way of getting a new generation into classic Mario, as much as we struggled with Mario Bros. 2, Mario Advance 1 at the time.
Right, yes. So I think it's interesting to start there in terms of Mario 2, because this was the first Mario game I owned, I believe, was Mario Advance. And I had played Mario stuff before. I played a little 64 at someone's house years ago, and I'd also played...
Had you ever tried 6 gold coins on my Game Boy?
Yeah, I think I did, but also my cousin had 6 golden coins, so that's where I played it mostly, is my cousin had a Game Boy with 6 golden coins. That was my main reference point for Mario. Versus this game, which if you'd have asked us at the time, we would have thought this is a new Mario game, right? Because we didn't know better. We had no idea of the history of the Super Nintendo and any of that stuff.
Super Mario Advance. It's a new game.
This Super Mario Advance is a new game. It's the Game Boy Advance Mario game, right? And I don't think I thought it was that weird at the time, right? Because having played Mario Land 2, which is itself a very weird Mario game, I don't think it fazed me that you jump on enemies and you can grab them and throw them, and you pick up turnips from the ground, and you can play as the princess, and you can play as Toad and this stuff, and they all have different abilities. I don't think it really shocked me like it did most people in terms of going from original Mario Brothers to Mario 2.
Could you play as all 4 characters in the original?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
So the original game, obviously everyone knows, Mario Brothers 2 was originally a game called Doki Doki Panic in Japan. And when they made the original Mario Brothers 2 in Japan, the Lost Levels as it's called here, they decided this is way too fucking hard for a Western audience. We're not going to release Mario Brothers 2 in the West. So instead, what they did was they took Doki Doki Panic, which was a much easier game and like weird and unique, and literally reskinned it. They literally changed all the characters to Mario characters, but all the enemies kind of stayed the same. So the Shy Guys and Birdo and all that stuff originate from Doki Doki Panic, right? Which is super weird, because it is the game, and the way they reframe it, right, is Mario is having a dream, because the end of the game is Mario lying in his bed with a bubble over his head, like dreaming about what's just happened, because it was never reality. It was like when our teachers in school told us it's the worst way to end a story, and it was all a dream, which I feel like we both did at some point in time. That's what Nintendo did. So Nintendo didn't listen to their teachers at school. Bad Nintendo.
What was the reason it was a bad way? Because it was cliched. Is that the idea?
It was just like a get out of jail free card, I guess. I don't know. It was whatever. I think a lot of those rules that English teachers taught you don't actually matter, like starting a sentence with and or but or whatever. Like, you get past a point in English where it becomes a stylistic thing to do that, right? So it is very weird. Anyway, Super Mario Brothers 2. All that said, that's my history with it. And really, back in the day, I didn't get that far, or I thought I didn't get that far in it. The reason I was able to get a bit further was I figured out the way to unlock the warp. So there was an ability to warp from World 2, I believe, to World 4. And so I was able to see World 4 when I was younger, the ice area and stuff, but I skipped over World 3, essentially. I wasn't able to do that. This time, obviously, much easier with the kind of... it's funny because the Super Nintendo version of Mario Brothers 2 on this collection looks really similar to the GBA version, right?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
Because they're both like playing with a similar kind of hardware tool set. I think the GBA version looks a bit nicer because it's a bit more cleaned up and polished. But I still really like the All-Stars version of 2. It looks great and definitely has a bit more vibrancy and color to it than the original did on NES. So yeah, so a lot of these things I have a huge amount of nostalgia for, and I remember just like playing this and jumping into the first level and being like, oh shit, this is like muscle memory to me. I remember this first level so much because we were really bad at video games, and so I never really got past the first level that often, and if I did, then I would lose my lives, and then I'd go back to the start of the world and things like that, and so I'd probably put like 10, 15 hours, maybe 20 into the GBA game, and never really got that far
that
into
much
it.
Time?
I imagine so. Like, think about it.
I reckon I only probably put about 4 or 5.
We look in the day, right? We had limited number of games that we'd play again and again. Sonic Advance was a big one. I must have put like 30 hours in Sonic Advance easily.
You're way overestimating them.
I don't think so. I think that we really played, because we were so terrible, Bally, we played so many hours where we made zero progress, right? Like, that would be a frequent thing where I'd do a level and not get anywhere, and I would start again.
The Game Boy Advance game came with the arcade version of Mario Bros, which all the Game Boy Advance games came with. Like, it was a side game mode you could go into that I would...
Yeah, they used to do that a lot. They did it with Mario 64 with mini games and stuff, but yeah. So yeah, playing this now is a lot of fun because there is that weird nostalgia for it. There's a weird muscle memory, and there's that weird like PTSD from the mask of like collecting the keys in this game, like picking up the key and the mask just starts chasing you is fucking terrifying. And as a kid, I never knew that if you drop the key, he will stop chasing you. And so I never dropped the key because I was worried about losing the key. I was worried actually about him coming and taking the key and taking it back. And to me, that was more terrifying than anything because then I'd have to go all the way back to the room and get it again. So that weird anxiety started spiking, and I was like, oh, wait a second. I've watched people play this game since then. I know you can just drop the key on the ground and he'll just disappear and go away. So that fear that I had about the mask chasing me just evaporated because I was like, actually, this is kind of easy and there's no real threat to it and it's fine. And so, yeah, I had no trouble with any of those levels getting the key in and going to the place and opening it. And that is the interesting thing to talk about Mario Brothers 2, right? Because jumping on enemies doesn't kill them. And so your function, your main verb of Mario is neutered in a way, and you have to do different things with it, and so you have to pick up enemies and then throw them. So throwing becomes your main verb, and picking up becomes your main verb, and that is very much the case in the boss fights, where against Birdo especially, you're jumping on an egg that is moving through the air, but you also have a couple of frames where you have to use your strength to pull up on the egg and get it. But if there's another egg coming your direction, you'll get hit by it before you can pull up on that egg. So it's a case of like waiting for a window where it's the last egg to come out of Birdo before she takes a break, and then you get it and then you throw it and it works the same way. And I never realized that you get loads of different versions of Birdo as you go through the game. So you get Green Birdo, who starts firing out fire and does other stuff that can hurt you in the meantime. So it's it actually can get quite tricky, but obviously having the rewind functionality helps a huge amount because you can just undo any damage you take and be like, I didn't actually do that, and you can just get through it very quickly. So I think I picked it up and played a few levels one day, and then over the weekend I think I went from World 3 or 4 to the end of the game just in one sitting in the afternoon, like a couple hours it took me. So it's a really short game if you mainline it, and obviously much shorter when you don't have to worry about losing lives and just using save states and stuff like that. It makes it much easier experience, but I just don't... I think the throwing thing is really fun, and it works generally when you're going up against normal enemies, but when it's up against bosses, it gets a little awkward because you have to... It's hard to judge the momentum. I especially found...
Can you only throw left and right?
Yes, but when you throw, you kind of have to walk forward and throw, and like jump and throw, and then like judging the arc of the throw is kind of tricky to like where it's going to go and hit the enemy. You'll probably remember from early in the game that bombs were a thing where you'd pull up bombs from the ground and you'd have to use them on the wall. I would have been so frustrated with this, and I was when I was younger, like, because you use up the bombs and then they're gone, and then you have to exit the room, re-enter the room to respawn them or whatever. But trying to get through those wall puzzles, there's so many of those, and you have to get the bomb placement exactly right, and so often you throw it, it touches the wall and bounces off slightly too much where it doesn't blow it up. I used the rewind a bunch for blowing up walls with the bombs. It was much nicer doing it that way than having to constantly worry about the exact trajectory that you're going on. But there is like a weird trick to it as well, where if you don't throw it with any momentum, you'll kind of stack them. So there is definitely puzzles at some points where you're trying to get up to an area, and you have to take those little mushroom blocks and dodge the kind of electric guys who go around platforms and get to an area where you can stack like 3 of them. Then you can jump high enough to get onto the platform. And you can also just drop them straight down. One of the things I found really funny was with Birdo, there was a Birdo that didn't shoot any eggs and only shot fire, and you had to use the mushroom blocks to kill that Birdo. So what you would do is you would collect the mushroom block, jump on top of Birdo's head, because you can just stand on Birdo, there's no damage being taken, and then you just press the drop button and it just drops straight down onto Birdo, so it's guaranteed getting a hit on the creature instead of like not being able to. So yeah, it's weird, and it definitely has some interesting applications. The final boss itself is a little bit frustrating, and I'm glad that obviously I was able to rewind during that and things like that.
Does it involve a lot of throwing?
It involves a lot of throwing and a lot of really difficult maneuvering around bubbles and just not great positioning, and very tight window in which you can hit Wart, because Wart's like the big bad of Mario 2, giant frog guy, and you can only hit him when his mouth is slightly open, and his mouth opens for like a couple of frames before he starts shooting bubbles out, and if you hit it when the bubbles are shooting, it will just hit the bubbles and not his mouth. So it's a really I definitely cheesed that one a lot in order to just get it, because you have to hit him 6 times as well as opposed to 3. So it's like, all right, Nintendo, I get it. You're really just trying to go for it at the end here. Has
this game inspired you to check out some of the Mario Bros. 2 stuff in Mario Maker?
Yes, a little bit. I was thinking about that. The frustrating thing about that is if you lose the power up, then you lose the abilities, which is a bummer, and I wish that they had made a full-on style. Like, that was the thing everyone was talking about in Mario Maker 2, was like, multiple styles, what does this mean? Could it mean Mario Bros. 2? And it didn't. I think maybe if Mario Maker 2 had gone better, had Nintendo done a better job with it, maybe we'd be looking at a situation where they had a full tile set that was Mario 2, and you could just make Mario 2 levels, which would have been great, and I would have loved to go back and mess with that stuff, but I am a little hesitant to do it just because I know I'm going to have to build this entire level around you always having the power-up, because if you don't have the power-up, and you lose it, then you can't like jump on bullet bills and pick them up.
You've managed to make some pretty devious levels around similar themes before, so I'm sure you
For
can,
sure. I could do it. It's just like an added thing of like, oh, okay, I have to make sure they always have this mushroom. So it's an extra layer of...
So it's a specific mushroom that gives you the ability to pick up things. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it basically turns you into Mario 2 Mario.
Right.
Which gives you the tool set of standing on enemies and picking them up and throwing them, essentially. I don't know if there's anything else it does. There might be other items you can use, but I think it might just be the mushroom is what it is, and that just does the business for you. And how do you feel about this game compared to 1, 3, World, to the other old Mario games? I like it a lot. I think I like it more than any of them, honestly. Apart from World, I think World is still probably better than it overall. Just because the other thing is level design wise and variety, it doesn't actually have that much. I think we saw a lot of the variety in the first few levels that we played, and so it maybe teased us in a way that the game was gonna do more and gonna be more expansive. And obviously it changes theme, and there's the ice world where you slip on the ice, and there's that one level that I posted to Twitter of me MLG proing it with Peach, just dodging all of the enemies and like not taking any hits. But overall it kind of does the same tricks again and again, and the level design is similar in the sense of go get the key, and then there's some levels where you have to pluck the sand, right? Remember plucking the sand, and enemies will fall down the gaps that you're plucking the sand in. So it does those tricks a few times over, and it actually, I think it ends after World 7, so even that, it's uncharacteristic of a Mario game. It's slightly weird and off. Doesn't kind of resolve perfectly like you would expect it to with like 8 worlds. There are 7 instead. So I do really like it. I think it is good to play this version because it's more polished, more cleaned up. And obviously playing as different characters is great. The thing is, I played as Peach the whole time because who doesn't play as Peach the whole time? It makes the perfect sense. She has the ability to float mid-air, and so you can adjust your platforming. So, like, fighting Birdo is way easier, and going over gaps is way easier, and just adjusting yourself. Like, it gives you that wiggle room, kind of like the shake in Mario Galaxy. It's like Peach is the perfect character for this game. So I don't understand anyone who doesn't play as Peach, but, you know, you can be Luigi, the inferior Peach, if you want to. But who wants to do that? Unless you're Bally, in which case you always play as Mario because you're vanilla and boring.
You gotta play vanilla first time round. Come on.
Yeah, well, yeah, don't think so. Peach is the main character of that game. No, she's the main character of that game. Best girl, Peach, the only girl in that game.
we need to play her DS game at some point.
No. I think I have tried that at one point in my life and decided it's bad in many ways. It's not a fun game. It's problematic. It's not good. Okay. Well, I think that's going to wrap us up for what we've been playing. We will be back after the break, chatting about your emails. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
Hello everyone and welcome to the second segment of today's show. It's time for emails. We've had some good ones in, so thank you very much for those. But if you would like to send in an email, please send it to ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. You can also post a comment in our Discord server. Link to that in the description. That would also be super swell. So, our first email this week is from Miranda, or Murandum, from North Carolina, who says, "Hello, Bally and MBZ. Here's a fun question. If you could live in any video game universe, which one would you choose? I think Pokemon is an obvious pick for a lot of people, but another world that I think would be fun is the Persona universe. Sure, it's similar to the real world in a lot of ways, but to me, having a persona sounds awesome. Plus, I feel like it's based more on your mental strength rather than physical strength. I'm pretty small and not really strong, so worlds like Fire Emblem or Zelda would likely be rough for me to get buy-in. I'm curious as to what your choices and reasonings behind them would be. Thanks for reading my email. I hope you're doing well in this crazy world we now live in. Cheers, Miranda."
Great, I love it. Well, she hit the nail on the head straight away with Persona, because my first answer with a bullet is Inaba from Persona 4 Golden. It's basically rural Japan, right? Like, who doesn't want to just go out and live a simple life in rural Japan with, like, going to school and, you know, obviously you get sucked into the TV and you can go into the Persona world, and that's maybe kind of dangerous because you could probably die doing that. But if we're just talking about hanging around with that group of people from P4 and, you know, going on a camping trip and hanging out at a bar and doing all this stuff, I would love to live there because I want to go to Japan. Obviously, you didn't go to that much of rural Japan when you were there, did you, Bal? You're mainly doing city stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we did some. We did a lot of day trips, and we stayed in like a small, very, very rural town next to Mount Fuji, Hakone. So we definitely got that vibe with these places, and
yeah.
I can tell you, as a tourist, they are much harder work. Like, they are just.
Oh, sure, yeah, no, definitely.
Like, a lot of restaurants and things don't tend to have like these big shop fronts like they do in, say, a place like the UK or something, because so it's hard to know, like, is that restaurant open? And you're essentially just gambling on walking into a building and hoping it's not like, someone's home. Like, you're hoping it is a restaurant and that it is open and that it is welcoming. So yeah.
Is it like it's like a real life video game where you just walk into anyone's house?
Just like that, yeah. It's strange. But yeah, I would love to see more of rural Japan. I think sort of seeing Hokkaido, seeing like northern Japan is something I want to do on future trips. Yeah, I would highly recommend it. Love it.
Well, anyway, the thing with Inaba is that it's actually fantasy Japan because everyone speaks English, so it would be fine.
Even better.
So you go in there, just hang out in those mountains and those very cozy villages, and that is kind of what I'm all about. So that would be my obvious pick. And yeah, there's definitely danger there, right? Because Persona 4 is a murder mystery, so there is the risk that the murderer will choose you to take down. But that's what, 1 in 1,000 chance.
Are we assuming you're going into this world as MBZ? You have your own strength, powers, whatever you want to call them.
Definitely, because I think for the most part, well, here's the thing, right? When you get transported from that place into the TV world, then your persona will happen and you'll get a persona and then you'll be able to fight battles probably with it. So I would have to acquire my persona first and then I would be able to defend myself. But before that, no. I would just be regular old me, which is all those kids in that game are regular people generally, and then their life gets twisted upside down and they get warped into a television, which is fun. It's good.
I think
Bali?
I would just love to be in the Wind Waker world, to be honest. And I know it's dangerous.
Surprise.
I could even do the caveat that it was like, at the end of the game, once everything's nice again or something, I'm just living on Windfall Island, especially Outset Island and Dragon Roost Island. I think these 3 islands are just incredibly welcoming, nice towns that I would happily live in.
Now, do you not think you get a bit bored, right? Because they are really small. There's not really anywhere you can go. Like, you just maybe sometimes you go up to the lookout and sit on the bench and look out to the sea. But it's I feel like with those islands, I like them in a video game. But if I was to actually live there, I feel like I'd feel too cramped, right? Like, you wouldn't have much to do aside from going out on the sea and finding another island, which could take, in the real world, anywhere from like 1 to 2 hours to sail and find a place.
Yeah, but I mean, either you can't have it both ways. Either the islands are the size they are in the video games, and therefore getting to those islands also takes the same amount of time, or they're larger. So I think that the sheer number of islands and things you can explore, I think, is plenty, and I would happily sail around.
Yeah, see, I don't want to learn how to sail. That's my big problem. Is like,
it's easy. It's easy.
Well, just because you have the King of Red Lions who does it for you with the
exactly.
swift sail.
Yeah, swift sail. Easy peasy.
Having a sentient boat to talk to would be pretty cool. I'm not gonna lie, that would be pretty good. But
just like inbuilt tutorial.
Yeah, but the thing is, it's just you. If it's just you going into the Wind Waker land, you're not Link, right? You're not special, so you don't get access to the King of Red Lions, probably. You'll just have a regular boat. So we've got to consider this as well, because you're not becoming Link. You're just Bali in the Wind Waker land. So who knows, man? You could be having to row your way for 2 hours across to Dragon Roost and try and get there.
Well, then the world would feel bigger, and that was your original complaint. So
yeah, exactly. Well,
it'd be fine.
Another one which is very obvious is like my Animal Crossing village that I made in New Horizons. I just go live there because really it's a town that I've made to my own specification and my own liking, right? And it's really nice. I have a Japanese restaurant in my Animal Crossing town. It's awesome. So I would go there all the time. There's no danger aside from tarantulas and scorpions that come out at night sometimes, which, let's be honest, real tarantula and scorpion can probably murder you if they are the right poisonous type. But in Animal Crossing, you just not fall over and you just revive at your house, so it's all good. You don't lose anything. There's rampant capitalism going on, which is fine in this world because there's no negative effects of capitalism. Everyone just benefits really. So it's just like, wow, what if it was a good system? And you can just get loads of stuff. You can build everything. It's a good time, and you can hang out with some cool animal friends. That sounds like a good time to me. And a very easy answer.
See, I think in Animal Crossing world, you'd actually get a bit bored.
Well, but I would argue the same thing about the Wind Waker world, though, right? Because
my counter to Animal Crossing was that's where you want Stardew Valley. That's where you want to be.
Okay, yeah,
in Pelican
all right.
Town, meeting people, making friends, getting that factory going on your farm.
So here's the thing, though, right? I think farming is actually really hard work, and that's why.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, Stardew makes it easy. Like living in a Stardew world, doing farming, if it was that easy, then sure. But if I actually had to exert my own effort in Stardew Valley to make a farm, I don't think I want to do that. Because like farmer's life is waking up early and doing all the stuff and then working really hard and then going to sleep and not doing much else. Which is great in a video game. But if you're in the video game version, I don't know. It depends, right? Like. What type of how do you change when you enter that video game world? Do you suddenly have the abilities of all the NPCs, all the characters in the game, or are you just you? It's hard to say.
I think talking about boredom and things to do, and when we're talking about universes generally, the Mushroom Kingdom is a fantastic option where you can...
I don't know. It depends where you're going in the Mushroom Kingdom, right?
Are you kidding me? Because you can join like a Mario Kart race. You can join you can get involved in golf and tennis.
Okay, you need to define like what is defined as the quote unquote Mushroom Kingdom, right? Because we have so many different places that Mario goes to in his games. What's the umbrella of the quote-unquote Mushroom Kingdom? Because when I think of Mushroom Kingdom, all I really think of is Peach's Castle, right? Like, what are the surrounding provinces and duchies? Like, what is the land, the region space of the kingdom?
It's all the worlds you go to in Sunshine and 64
Delfino is part of the Mushroom Kingdom, really? Don't they have their own legislation, right? Like, Mario gets sentenced to community service. Surely, Mario, king of the world, like most important person in the Mushroom Kingdom, wouldn't get, put under law and order like that. He'd be able to wiggle his way out of that shit. I'm pretty sure Delfino comes under a different jurisdiction than the Mushroom Kingdom, right? Like, surely. Also, we could bring up Delfino as a good place. Would you not want to go to Delfino Plaza as a hangout spot on vacation? Or I wouldn't say live there, but that's obviously like Mario, it's a good vacation spot.
The Isle of Delfino is cool because it's got the theme park and this other hotel and like there's all these other areas, and that is really cool. So
but would you want to live there, right? It's more like a either retirement place you go or go on holiday there.
Yeah, but I don't want to miss out on all the golf, and that's what I really want to do.
You can play golf in Delfino. I'm sure they've got a golf course somewhere there that you didn't go to in Sunshine.
There is a tropical course in Toadstool Tour on GameCube, and I don't think it's linked to Mario Sunshine, but we
can pretend it is.
One.
We can pretend it is. Mushroom Kingdom's an interesting one just because I just don't think it's very well defined, even by the Mario games.
That's what makes it so great.
Because you can just make up what it is, basically.
Well, there's so many references and places and things that are grey areas of whether they are in the Mushroom Kingdom or not, especially in games like Mario Kart, where there's just so much diversity, so much variety that I think you'd never get bored.
Okay. Rana brings up she wouldn't want to live in a Fire Emblem world, but I would counter that with Three Houses. I would love to go to the Fodlan Officers Academy and just be a student at that place, because I feel like it reflects our experience of school in some senses, because we did go to a quite like not ancient but like what do you call it?
We went to school in a castle, yes.
We went to school in not really a castle, but like in a very old building that is reminiscent of the kind of structures in the Officers
with
Academy.
Houses and things.
Yeah, we were both in different houses and things like that. So I think I would fit in quite well there. But also you get to learn how to actually fight with swords, and maybe I would get magic. Maybe I could actually become a mage. So that is definitely an exciting thing for me. I would like to learn how to, because the thing is with Fire Emblem, if you're just dropped into like Fire Emblem 7, you're in the middle of a continental war and like you have no skills whatsoever. However, if you drop into Three Houses and you do 3 years at the Officers Academy, at least the game will kind of bring you through and level you up to the point where you actually could survive that world. Like you're being turned into a warrior, and then I could actually take it on. And there's definitely some nice places across Fodlan you'd like to go to. Hopefully after the war is over, then you survive it and you can chill there. But that is very contingent on surviving a war. So maybe not, but I do think if I was to spend 3 years in Fodlan, then I just go to the Officers Academy and then I just leave that video game world if I could. So that would be a good one. Any others, Bally?
I really loved the world of Yoku's Island Express, but then I thought, if I'm plopped into that world and there's all these things bashing me and pinging me around the world, maybe it won't be as pleasant. And
no,
but there's not like enemies in the traditional sense in that world, which I liked. So it felt like there's loads of like tropical, colourful, rainforesty type places.
Also, you'd have to be shrunk down to the size of a bug, right, in order to traverse it.
That's also an issue, perhaps. Yes. But yeah, it's a really lovely world, and maybe something like Tropical Freeze is also in a similar category, but it's a lot more hostile, I feel, and also there's a lot of levels there that are really cold and pretty miserable, I'm sure. So I don't know. And back to like sports, that kind of thing, I do think Wave Race would be a really nice, fun world to be in that is very realistic, so maybe is very boring in that sense, and that whole racing thing seems quite hard. Like if say you were dropped in the Wave Race world and you found actual, ski-doo racing or whatever that you call it was really hard, are you stuck in that world forever and you can just sit on the beach watching them? There's nothing else you can do, really.
Yeah, I guess you just like hang out at all the courses and are a bystander to some degree. Because there's not much else like explored about the lore of Wave Race, right? We don't really know much about the world outside of what presents to us. So that's a good one. My last one would obviously be Xenoblade. I would live in Alchemoth because it's a very futuristic technological city that is
such a hostile world. That world.
It is a hostile world, but if I lived in Alchemoth, I wouldn't have to go anywhere and like be in dangerous spots. I would like look over this gorgeous, enormous sea.
Sit in your bedroom that's like 1,000,000 acres large.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and there's a really nice garden spot in Alchemoth as well. And if I wanted to, like, I could probably like get some guards to go with me and explore down by the beachside and down by the grasslands so that I didn't get attacked by terrible monsters, because obviously there's loads of those. But yes, I think that would be a good place to stay. It's like a 7-star hotel almost. It's like the Burj Dubai of Xenoblade, of just like this stunningly huge structure that floats in the sky and has astonishing views of the world. Like that seems pretty good to me. And you'd probably get fed pretty well. The high-end tier seem like, they have life sorted out up there. Probably at the expense of the HOMs and stuff, as we kind of get to learn. But, for a while, they did all right, those high-end tier. So I wouldn't mind being there. Even if I didn't get wings. If it was just me, I would probably be, without the ability to fly with those head wings.
Entire city's designed for having wings, but other than that...
Oh, yeah, no, it's fine. Hey, look, Shulk and friends got around. They didn't have wings. It was fine.
Yeah, it just took a while to traverse, but yes.
They've got teleporters, man. Who doesn't want teleporters, right? Like, it's good stuff. Great. Well, yeah, I think there's some good options, I would say.
Yeah, thanks very much for your email, Miranda. Our next email is from Kamikaze Worm, who says, "Hi guys, recently I've been working my way through older Zelda games in a bid to complete every Zelda game minus the NES games." That's a good option. I like that option. Given that Link's Awakening had a recent remake, is there any Zelda you would like to see remade or ported? Given that Breath of the Wild 2 is likely to be 2021 or later, would love to hear what you would like to see in the meantime. Or would you prefer a completely new 2D Zelda game, which they think is unlikely? Personally, hoping for Oracle of Seasons/Ages, as they are on my list to do. Keep up the good work.
Great. Well, we'll talk about it in the third segment, but we do have another Zelda game coming this year. Not maybe the one we wanted, but yes, that is happening. I honestly, for me, the two Zelda games that need to be remade, most importantly of all, are Zelda 1 and 2, by far, in terms of... I just don't think they're very fun to go back and play today. I don't think that they hold up particularly well control-wise. I think that they are a little antiquated just game design-wise, and I would like to see what they could do by revitalizing them. Because you remember when they showed off that weird kind of tech demo thing for Breath of the Wild that was Zelda 1, but with Breath of the Wild physics in it? And I look at that and I'm like, wow, like you could actually make a really interesting 2D game that uses the Breath of the Wild physics engine. But there's just the idea that Breath of the Wild came out of the ideas that began in that first Zelda. You can really make a almost pared down like demake of Breath of the Wild in the Zelda 1 engine, and like kind of refresh it to some degree, add some things in there and make it a bit more modern. And I don't know what kind of art style you would go with, because Nintendo seems to like finding a specific look for these games, right? And the Link's Awakening was with this very kind of claymation, almost toy-like design that did kind of fit to some degree with the original look, but was distinctive in its own right. I think original Zelda 1, like, imagine that game with the art style of the artwork, the original Zelda 1 artwork of like looking over the horizon, you know?
Yeah.
If you can somehow like get that implemented with a 2D perspective, I think that would be really cool. And then Zelda 2, obviously, I think actually you could make really, really good. It's an interesting RPG as it is, but making it a bit more streamlined, like lessening the difficulty, because that game fucking kicks you in the balls like non-stop. I would love to see both of those just fully remade, like from the ground up. Just reassess them and change things if you need to, and don't be sacred about it. And I know Nintendo is just like, sometimes they are really precious about a lot of aspects, but I think something like Breath of the Wild shows that you don't need to be. And if you're remaking something, it's to make it better in a lot of ways. And I think the worst remakes are the ones that are just like, well, it's the same game again. And Link's Awakening kind of is that, right? They didn't really change much about it. It was kind of the same game, just with a really pretty lick of paint put on it. And some of those ideas don't work as well today from a game design perspective. And I think the same could be said for a lot of stuff in Zelda 1 and Zelda 2. So refreshing those would easily be top of my list.
Yeah, I think that's fairly likely, seeing as Nintendo is now celebrating 35th anniversaries, because that's the birthday everyone likes to celebrate, and considering it is Zelda in 2021, which will have its 35th anniversary.
Nintendo just do this every 5 years, basically. Every 5 years they have a thing of, it's the Mario's 25th, now it's Mario's 30th, now it's Mario's 35th, you know, and they'll do it for 40th.
But the fact that it is 35 will be 35 years since Zelda 1 on NES, maybe that is the one that they do something with, like you suggested, some sort of remake that, as you say, it does need more mechanical, ground up kind of rethinking, more so than Link's Awakening, which had none, and as you said, was a lick of paint. So I think that'd be really cool. I question, like, will Breath of the Wild 2 be coming out next year, and would they be in the market of doing both? And I think, judging from what they've done with Mario, there's a good chance they'd be up for both if it worked out that way, because they could celebrate the whole year. They could make a big deal if that's when the Switch Pro comes out. It could all link together. They could throw in some sort of 3D collection, which I think you could get into a huge debate about what makes it in that 3D collection. But probably you'd think the HD remakes they've already done, so Twilight Princess and Wind Waker, and then I think you would probably go with like some sort of Skyward Sword upgrade, and then keep the N64 games separate, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, well, the N64 games are weird because they've been remade on 3DS and not on another platform, so it makes them harder to port over if they were to take those versions. I'm sure Grezzo would be able to do that, like make more Switch-friendly editions of those games to come out, but I do hope that they go back to some of these older 2D games. Like, the Oracle games are good as well, but for me, I think having had Link's Awakening and having played those Oracle games relatively recently, I'm kind of burned out on that style, that specific Game Boy era style of Zelda. So I wouldn't want to personally play those anytime soon, although I think a lot of people would, just because they're really underplayed games in the franchise, and they are really good. I do like the Oracle games, but I wouldn't necessarily want to see it. But I think taking Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks and giving them more of a Wind Waker makeover, like putting them in HD and like giving them a different perspective, remaking them to some sense, could be interesting. But I think the tricky thing with those games is they are so built around the DS as a platform and the control mechanism and the puzzles of the DS that I think it would be really hard to do those. It's just those are the ones that I think will age the most poorly over time, just because the pixelation on the DS visuals.
Yeah, and I think we've discussed it before, but it is basically Minish Cap is the last kind of 2D completely ground up new fresh 2D Zelda we've had.
If we're talking about top down, yeah.
Top down, because obviously Link Between Worlds has huge inspiration. World was copy and pasted the world from, I've forgotten the name of the game now.
Link to the most famous game of all time, Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past,
Link
Bally.
to the Past, that's the one, yeah, Link to the Past. So the fact that apes so much of that game, we are due like a brand new 2D ground up Zelda. So if we do start going into the world of Zelda 1 remakes or Oracle remakes, or it's just like, come on, Nintendo, you've got a brand new 2D Zelda in you. Why don't you get it out there? Because I think we are definitely due one. And if that means that we get ports of or remakes of the 3D games, then so be it. Because obviously we know Breath of the Wild 2 is down the line, but I think we are definitely due a 2D brand new Zelda that is as innovative as a game like Minish Cap, which I think Minish Cap feels completely different in my view to stuff like the Oracle games and Link's Awakening, even though it is that obviously top-down style. And likewise, I think Link Between Worlds feels completely different again. Like, you can really reinvent the feeling of a 2D top-down Zelda without making the same game 3 times, which is what the Oracle games and Link's Awakening can feel like at times.
Yeah, and I think the hard thing about those is just the visual style and all the assets that get reused between them and that type of thing that makes it feel a bit more homogenous than individual games. And I can separate them in my mind, but I know what you mean. And it would probably cause even more problems if they did those games in the same art style as Link's Awakening, because then people would be like, oh no, these games are going to merge in my mind again because they're using the similar art style once more, which I don't know if they would do that or not. It seems like Nintendo. Yeah,
the Oracle games with a Link's Awakening remake Lick of Paint seems like incredibly low-hanging fruit in this way that it's a kind of low-hanging fruit Nintendo generally doesn't go for, but occasionally does, you know? Yeah. Like, it's like, oh, they might just go for that, and if they wanted one more, you know, feather in their cap or something in the year 2021 to make a big deal of 35th anniversary, then maybe that's something they'd add to that year on top of, you know, some other remake or some collection on top of Breath of the Wild 2. Who knows? We'll see.
I definitely think that given what they've done with Mario, with the remasters of these 3D games, I think because they have Twilight Princess, because they have Wind Waker already done, they can just remaster Skyward Sword and it's fine. Right? Like, I think that they will just do that, honestly, and that's the easiest. So, like, the boring answer is, like, yeah, they'll probably just do the same thing with Mario same thing with Zelda that they've done with Mario, and have 3 games, those 3, as remastered versions, and people will buy them again, because that's what people do.
But just generally speaking, like, I've played all the Zeldas bar, like, 2 or 3, and at this point, remakes are fine in that, but, like, it's all about the new Zelda, the freshness, the new things. I think Nintendo can be a bit guilty of like, oh, well, especially with Zelda more so than Mario, just like, we'll remake this, we'll remaster that, we'll port this to that. And sure, I would love a Wind Waker port in some form on Switch, fine. But like, I've already played that game 3, 4, 5 times. Like, I it's always about the new thing for me. And
what you're asking, Bally, is where is Triforce Heroes 2? Am I right?
I mean, Triforce Heroes is a woefully underappreciated game, and I've had a blast for that game.
I think it's aptly underappreciated, honestly, but sure.
No, it is fantastic. And like, I'm sure Nintendo will try the whole multiplayer Zelda thing again. But when Nintendo make a brand new Zelda game, it is a huge event, 2D or 3D, and the fact that they stack all these years in between with remakes and ports and remasters, and it's just like, yeah, we get it, but it's all about the fresh Zelda. So I'm obviously most excited for Breath of the Wild 2, and that's where it's got to be. And if there is a new game in 2D, that would also be very exciting. But ports are not necessarily a big deal, as much as I'm sure we'll end up replaying some of those games and have a good time.
Yeah, I'll play Wind Waker again. I still have to finish my Twilight Princess Let's Play, so if they put out Twilight Princess again for like, oh god, I think in the time since I've started that playthrough, they released Skyward Sword, Breath of the Wild, they re-released Twilight Princess, like all these games just keep coming out, and I still haven't finished my original playthrough, Twilight Princess. It'll happen. I need to record this year's.
We've got our Wind Waker Let's Play to get through.
Oh yeah, no, that's a band. I'm sorry, mate, we're done with that. But I've got to finish the Twilight Princess one. That's guaranteed. So yes, I'll put out my yearly episode at some point. Only a few months ago in the year, so I should probably get on that soon. Anyway, I think that's it, right? I think we've kind of covered most of the Zelda games. I really want to play Majora's Mask, and that's been sitting on my 3DS for a long time, so I do want to get to that. But if they re-release that on Switch, that may make me reconsider, like, waiting to play it. I don't know. But I don't think that'll happen, really.
But again, they fixed so many quality of life things with that remake, remaster, port, whatever you want to call it, on 3DS, that for them to then go back and put the 64 version on Switch would be a bit of a kick in the teeth.
Yeah, that would be very yikes. I agree.
Especially with Majora's Mask, where those quality of life changes, I would argue, are maybe more of a big deal than a game like Ocarina, say.
Yes, definitely.
Cool. But yeah, thanks very much for your email, Kamikaze Worm. That's definitely a good one to discuss, especially at this point in time with all the Mario stuff going on. But that is all we've got time for emails this week. Join us after the break, where we are going to be talking about that Mario news and another announcement that is actually Zelda related. So we will be right back.
Alright everyone, welcome back to the third and final part of the show. Today, it's time to talk about some news been dropping from Nintendo. For once, the drought has continued in terms of regular Nintendo Directs, but as Bally and I kind of predicted, like random Wednesday, they drop just news, and that's what continues to happen with multiple announcements going on from Nintendo. But we've got a couple of things. We kind of know Nintendo's holiday lineup at this point, which is Pikmin 3 Deluxe is coming in October. Have we talked about that, by the way? I don't think we even mentioned Pikmin 3 Deluxe, but that is happening.
Pretty sure it was announced after the last show, but yeah, it's not a random drop.
Then we have the Mario 3D All-Stars coming in September, in literally a week, right? And then we also have in November the Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity thing. So that's kind of Nintendo's lineup for the rest of the year. Pretty barren. We've got remasters and then a spin-off of a Breath of the Wild Hyrule Warriors Dynasty Warriors type game, which I'll be honest with you doesn't excite me a huge amount, but we can get into it and we can discuss all that stuff. How are you feeling about Nintendo's 2020 now that we kind of know the lay of the land, Bally? Has COVID just gutted them, or was this always going to be the plan, do you think?
I don't think COVID has necessarily completely gutted them. I think that this was probably going to be a fairly quiet year in terms of general releases anyway. And I think, again, it's just one of those situations where if you were a Wii U owner and you kept up with Nintendo releases day and date when they came out, like we have done for about the last decade, then unfortunately there's not a ton of new releases in that sense. But I think for newcomers to Switch versus Wii U, of which there are millions upon millions, then I think games like 3D World and the Mario Collection and Pikmin 3 port, remake, whatever you want to call it, are all great announcements. And I think in that sense, it's a good idea. It's good for Nintendo. But like I said, if you're us, it's more ports that we've played before. So
Yeah, like on that topic though, because we haven't really talked about Pikmin 3 Deluxe. Are you excited by that at all? Does it interest you as like going back and playing Pikmin 3 because it is one of your favorite Nintendo games, Pikmin 3?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of stuff on lots of systems I'm playing at the moment, and do I want to play full price for a little bit of extra content? I'm kind of veering on no, to be honest, and I'm more hyped for like a new Pikmin game. As much as Pikmin 3 is an incredible game, and I highly recommend anyone who's not tried it to give it a go.
Do you think you could rope Caroline in for co-op in Pikmin 3?
Oh, that is a good idea. Maybe that is an idea.
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of liked the controls of the original Pikmin 3 with like the Wiimote and nunchuck. So I'm skeptical of that. I don't know. I'd be interested how it controls, knowing that game was pretty much designed for Wiimote and nunchuck, because certainly when you played the game on the Wii U gamepad, handheld only, the controls felt really cumbersome in comparison to the precision you gained from the Wiimote. So
right,
I'd be worried the entire game will feel like that. Maybe I could be wrong, or maybe
they did add in those touch controls later down the line, right, where you could play it just on the touch screen. And I don't know how well there's. I know Greg Leahy talked about it on RFN, and it seemed like they did a decent job with it. But whether they add those back in for the Switch version, I'd imagine they should do, right, because they already existed. But
yeah, and I think, because when you go back and play Pikmin 2, it feels fine, but that game was designed ground up for those controls. So that's where maybe people who jump into Pikmin 3 now are kind of blissful ignorance in a way, where they don't know the precision you could have had with the Wiimote necessarily. I'm skeptical of all that. So that would kind of put me off going whole hog on the co-op with Caroline, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great game. If you haven't played Pikmin 3, it's fantastic. You should really check it out. But then, obviously, Nintendo announced very recently this Mario collection that is coming out. It's a 2-week window from announcement to release, which is just wild. But we've known about it for ages, right? People have rumored it since the beginning of this year, practically. So we've kind of known that we were going to get all these games in a collection all together. The question was, what are they going to do with them, right? Are these going to be remakes? Are they going to be just ports? Are they going to be remasters? Like, what type of work are Nintendo putting into these games? And what it sounds like is they are doing the bare fucking minimum, which is to say the 3D All-Stars is Mario 64 that is more HDified, like it's in 720p, Mario Sunshine that is now in widescreen and obviously in 1080p, and Mario Galaxy also in widescreen with 1080p. And that's it. Those 3 games on the Switch. No bells and whistles, just kind of like that. And I don't know how you feel about it, Bally, but I think maybe people's expectations were skewed by leaks potentially of the idea that what if they remade Mario 64? What if they went full hog and put it in the Odyssey engine and just made a beautiful looking version of that game? And what if they went in and did what they did with Wind Waker with Sunshine, make Sunshine HD in terms of refining elements of that game and making it a smoother experience? Because Wind Waker HD, Wind Waker's a fantastic game to start with, it's way better than Sunshine is in my opinion, but the smoothness and the additions they made to the HD version just made it a better game overall.
Yes. And
Sunshine is in dire need of a quote-unquote Sunshine HD, like Wind Waker.
Yeah, and I think once people play Sunshine, they'll probably realize that and be like, hey, why didn't you remake it? And are Nintendo fans being too demanding? I really don't think on this issue they are. I think it is a bit of a travesty that it is a bare port. And you're right, maybe our expectations were massively raised when they shouldn't have been for these games potentially being remade. But as you say, Nintendo have remade Wind Waker, they've remade Twilight Princess. Remade is maybe a strong word, but they've done substantial things to make those games better from the originals. That's more than just a coat of paint. And I think that especially in an era where you've got stuff like the Spyro trilogy on Switch, which is a remake of a trilogy and is fantastic, but by what you've said about it, and I look forward to playing that game, and the Crash trilogy again, which maybe the jump isn't quite as nice as the Spyro one, perhaps.
But I mean, those games are still those games, right? But what they did to them visually is, you look at Spyro and you compare that to the PS1 game, and it is night and day, the visual replacement that they've done. it's astonishingly good looking. So this is the thing, though, right? It's like those are 3 games, and they are $40 when they came out. Versus now, this is a Mario collection that has had basically no work done to it, and is a full price thing. And that's just the Nintendo tax, right? Like, this will sell fucking gangbusters. It will sell better than both those collections combined because it's Mario, and he has a brand cachet and a power that is way beyond Crash and Spyro put together, obviously. And so, sad as it is, Nintendo can do the bare minimum and still get away with it.
It's super sad, and I think it does, in my view, it burns a lot of goodwill just that Nintendo sometimes build up with certain projects, and other stuff they announced, I think, had built up better goodwill, I'd say, but then you just think, when Nintendo get all cash grabby and that kind of thing, and they have every right to, like, Mario is very popular, people will buy this, and he does hold a lot more cash than Spyro, absolutely. These are undeniable truths. It is just a very, very sad reality of the situation we're in, that they can just, like, what other, and we can talk about the exclusivity in a second, but like, what is there any other company in video games that could get away with having exclusive ports in a collection of ports of games that are over a decade old? Like, I don't think there's maybe any other company in games that can get away with that in the same way. Like,
I don't know. Like, you've seen stuff like with Call of Duty and Activision putting out the original Modern Warfare as a bonus only if you buy the new game. You have to buy the new game in order to get the remaster or whatever it was, which was some hot bullshit. But I don't know. Yeah, it's the thing with Nintendo is that they just have such a commanding franchise and brand power in the industry that, yeah, they can do this. And you can argue as well, like, I definitely see people's perspective of, the communities who love the original Super Mario 64, speedrunners, for example, right, who love that original game and want to speedrun it and stuff like that, and if they can do it on their Switch, that's what they want. And people who kind of, like, treat these games as sacred cows in terms of, you can't touch Super Mario 64, it's untouchable, it's a perfect game, and if you change anything about it, it could ruin it, and things like that. And I always am very weirded out by that perspective, because the original will always exist, right? You can always play Mario 64 on the N64, or even on the Wii U Virtual Console. You can always play Mario Sunshine on GameCube. So having these games just re-released again, fine, like, they still exist elsewhere, and like they're touched up versions, but I always will err on the side of remaking it, changing it, like improving it is always where I will want to see things go in that direction.
And I do think that we had come to terms with the idea that Nintendo weren't doing a virtual console this, let's say, generation with the Switch. And like, come Switch launch, we were like, where's the virtual console? Why is it not here? And the more we grew to love the Switch and played more indie games and other games, we kind of thought, you know what, it's not ideal, but it's fine. It's livable that, we don't have a virtual console on Switch. But then it is just really that salt in the wind in some ways, where, so these are some of the games that would have been on virtual console on Switch that you're now putting in a collection and doing almost no work on. And it's like, that is where it feels extra cash grabby in a way, where Nintendo Switch, by all accounts, based on the Wii U and the Wii, should have launched with an eShop that included a game like Mario 64. It would have been the original version, whatever, fine. But like, it's just it feels like a super gut punch in some ways, that like, to go for the no virtual console and then repackaging and selling ports in this way, it does leave you feeling a bit flat.
And especially when you look at other companies and the way they have handled collections, right? You think of the Mega Man collections and the Castlevania and Contra collections, and obviously those are much older games and therefore a much lower price point, but they do a lot of stuff in terms of the Mega Man Legacy Collection has so much history and museum, like, artwork that you can go through and all that type of thing. And Nintendo are like, you can listen to the soundtrack on your Switch. Like, and they keep doing this, like, with Smash Brothers and stuff. Like, they treat people as if they're going to walk around with their Switch in their pocket as a fucking MP3 player. Like, who fucking does that? Nobody, right? Like, maybe us when we were like 12 we would do that, but not now.
The way
right?
that was presented was like they were going to have this long list of things added to the game, and I was like, this is great. They can have all these things and save states and rewind, and it's like, no, none of that. Absolutely none of it.
Well, we don't actually know yet, right? Like, feasibly, they could have rewind features, they could have save states,
possible.
but it's possible, but I doubt it.
I wouldn't put money on that. But
no, definitely not. I'm not a betting man in that sense, but yeah, it So the thing with that, right, and I think because we're kind of disappointed about it, we're like, well, these are still really good games, right? And they deserve to be replayed. They deserve to have the spotlight given to them because they're still all fantastic.
Yes.
And so that's what we're going to do, and we'll talk about that again at the end of the show.
Yes.
But we are going to be playing through all of these games and giving them a bit of a deeper dive and kind of getting into the nitty gritties of the 3D Mario games that defined Mario up until kind of the modern era. So that'll be fun to chat through. I'm excited to replay Mario 64. It's been so long since I played the DS game, and that's the other thing, right? Is like the DS version had 30 extra stars in it, and it had playing as different characters, and it's one of those things where you just think of a world where you could get the content from the DS game as well as a like spruced up, shinier version of Mario 64. That I would like to live in, but we don't live in that reality, unfortunately, and I don't know if we ever will. Maybe not until the Switch 3 will we get a true, proper, redone version of Mario 64.
Yeah, who knows?
Anyway, there's other stuff announced in that Mario 35th anniversary thing.
Can we briefly talk about the exclusivity period?
Oh, yes, good point. I forgot about that.
I do think this is where the whole port thing is one level of disappointment. The exclusivity thing is just flat out barbaric when it comes to like cash grabbing, and it is the worst. So
if you don't know, basically these games, either digitally or physically, will only be available for purchase until the end of March next year. So you have a 6-month period in which to buy these, otherwise they disappear forever, which is just fucking lunacy to me. I don't understand it. People have argued that they've done this before with previous All-Stars collection. Like they had an All-Stars collection on Wii, obviously the original Super Mario All-Stars. But like this fucking false scarcity bullshit that Nintendo do all the time, I cannot stand it. And it really stinks of like, oh, well, people might not buy this because it's not very appealing because it's just ports of these games, right?
Yeah,
and
fine,
so we have to give them,
should
like,
they remade them?
Yeah, exactly. And so we have to push people into pre-ordering them so they have access to them so that they play them and give us money. And it's, God, it sucks. It really does. Nintendo, terrible business decisions sometimes. And this is probably a smart business decision because it makes them a fuckload of cash, but in the long run, it just loses a lot of goodwill from consumers, and especially from people like us. It's terrible. I don't like it. So
yeah, I've not got much to add. Just to how the idea that something digital can be so held back and constrained is just stupid.
Yes. Talking of time limits, there is another game that is time limited. This time, it is a Nintendo Switch Online exclusive, which is basically Tetris 99 people liked, and so Nintendo were like, what if we do that with Mario? And that's what they did. It's Super Mario 35, I believe, and it's basically Tetris 99, except you're playing the original Mario Brothers, and you can throw shit on other people's screens, and enemies start raining from the sky, and it looks pretty nightmarish, especially...
There's 35 Marios rather than 99.
Exactly, yes, because I think it would get a bit too chaotic if there were 100 people playing Mario. So, and that makes sense, right? Because thematically it's the 35th anniversary, so that's kind of why they've gone along those lines. It works. And I'm more interested in this than I am in Tetris, because I'm not a Tetris person. Neither of us are really. So I'll check it out. But again, this is only here until the end of March next year. For what reason? Like,
yeah, I mean that's the sort of thing I could see them extending if it is successful. Like, don't get me wrong, it's completely crap that they have said it's going to end of March, and that is like just flat out wrong. But I can totally see them changing that if it is successful. I don't know. Yeah,
maybe, but like it just seems illogical. Like, what is the reason? Like, what is the actual reason behind this decision? I don't know. Like, I can't explain to you why.
What if it's like, we need something that gets everyone away from the launches of the PlayStation 5 and Series X at this particular point in time to get on the Switch? And yeah, I don't know. Like it is baffling. Like,
well, because you think about it and you're like, surely they want to add value to a Switch Online subscription so that more people will get a Switch Online subscription. And yet you're telling me that this thing that you want people to subscribe for is just going to go away? And then what, they're going to do, unsubscribe? Right, like it's weird. I don't understand it. But anyway, yes, I'll check that out. I'll give it a go, give it a whirl. I doubt I'll get that into it, but it seems like a fun thing for people who are into Tetris 99, which I know there are a lot of people out there who like that style of game. Battle Royale are very popular these days. I think probably my standout announcement of this is something that I'm never going to buy and wish existed when I was 10, but, you know, it's kind of not feasible right now for me to play it, but it's the fucking Mario Karts, man. Okay, so there's a Mario Kart game called Mario Kart Live Home Circuit, and you literally get...
wild.
You pay $100, I don't know how much it is in the UK, 80 quid probably, for this real-life Mario Kart that has a camera in it, and you remote control it from your Switch, and it ARs a bunch of races, and you can just drive it around your living room. And
you're like pre-programming a track using checkpoints.
Yes, so you drop checkpoints around your room, and you create a track, and you can, you know, at home as a kid, just like make a track in it. God, it's so cool. I love this technology. I think it's awesome. But, you know, I don't think either of us have the space in which to do this. Like, house I'm in at the moment is carpets everywhere, so that's just a no-go. And in your flat, like, you have space in your room, but it's not really able to have a circuit around it, really.
I mean, I'd have to, like, push back everything else in order to use it. I think that's the thing that surprises me the most about this is Japanese people don't have space in their houses or flats to have these things. Like, it is the most Western announcement in some ways that Nintendo have made in a long time. And I also, like, I was quite into RC cars, like, growing up. Like, I definitely, my family invested in, like, some pretty, you know, high-tech remote control cars, and stuff like the size of the tires and the power and the ratio, like how high it is off the ground to make sure, like, what terrain it can go on or not is, like, very important. And from this trailer, it looks like it really does have to be a perfectly flat indoor
hardwood floor, basically.
Exactly, wood hard floor, which is quite limiting, especially when you're talking about, and also interesting, like, the speed it will go at, and there's a lot of question marks about the functionality of how well this will work, but the idea is incredible, and is, again, like, this presentation was almost Nintendo at their worst and their best, where they're doing, like, these cash grabbing exclusivity announcements at the same time as doing a really innovative, like, augmented reality toy around Mario Kart, which is just incredible. And you're right, if I was 10 years old, we would buy these in a heartbeat and spend days upon days playing with them.
We would spend whole weekends, like, at each other's houses making tracks and racing each other.
Yeah, we would be pushing back furniture, pissing off our parents, you know, just like, we are playing Mario Kart right now. Get out of the way. We are coming through. And yeah, so Nintendo, like, if this works, and even the idea alone is Nintendo at their best, like, this is innovation and is very impressive.
Yeah, I really like the idea. But when you look at it, right, it's $100 for one cart, and if, say, you have a family with multiple siblings, you're going to want to race each other. So you're going to have multiple Switches, multiple carts, and, like, when you get to that point, you start to think, well, like, really, if you can afford all that, let's be honest, you'll have a house that's big enough to play this.
Exactly.
So maybe it does work, right? Maybe it just hits that market of people who are rich enough to have a giant house with a giant living room and a floor. So, yeah, it's cool, and we'll see how it does. I doubt it'll sell super well, just because it's probably a smaller amount of people who will be able to have those circumstances, but I like weird Nintendo, you know, like Ring Fit. I still need to get Ring Fit, man. That thing, it's still really expensive, but I still want to get it. I love these stupid, weird experiments they do. They're great. They also put out the All-Star Collection. Obviously, I talked about Mario 2 in the first segment, but It's cool that that's now on the Super Nintendo Online service because it's got remastered versions of basically like this is kind of what you wanted from the 3D All Stars.
Totally.
Is like make them look different. And the Mario 3 version on All Stars is probably one that you would most want to play, Bally, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Like this is what a collection looks like, and was such a big deal at the time. Obviously before our time, but like. Remakes, like improving elements of the games, putting them together in a collection. And as an aside, it is a really nice collection to include in this 35 anniversary. Like it's a nice additional thing to have. Definitely,
yeah, it's really cool. And then they obviously are going to put out 3D World on the Switch, which, again, one of those worst-kept secrets in video games. But they're adding content to it. Bowser's Fury looks like a bit more of an open environment, which is cool because 3D World, very linear, more in the 2D Mario style of level design for the most part. And a great game. I enjoyed it a lot, not as much as 3D Land. And definitely a game that excels in multiplayer. Like the one time we played multiplayer with Ali T, I think that was the most fun I had with 3D World. And I think otherwise, I just think the level design for single player is a bit too wide and doesn't really work as well. But I know you love 3D World a lot more than I do, Bally.
Yeah, and like this was Mario's first step into HD, which at the time felt very cool. And obviously
the rain in 3D World, just some of the best looking stuff I've seen in a video game.
Yeah, it's an incredibly well put together game in terms of like the soundtrack, the sound design. I think some of the power ups are really cool. Like the cherry is hilarious. The Cat Mario is great. Like I had an absolute blast even with the single player, but I do agree the multiplayer is good fun. And I think they confirmed this has online co-op.
Yes, I believe so. Which Nintendo barely ever do or even acknowledge.
So again, if you're one of those people out there who owns a Switch but never played this on Wii U, which is probably most people, but maybe not necessarily who listen to this podcast, then definitely check out this game. It is a very, very strong like 3D Mario game.
Yeah, it's great, and it's coming next year, so it's February, I believe, is when it's going to come out. So yeah, you can play that when it does. And I think that kind of covers everything. There was the Game & Watch as well that they announced at the start of the show, which is it's a Game & Watch with the original Mario Brothers and Lost Levels on it, and also
so weird.
It's a watch
clock and that one Game & Watch game with the balls, the juggling.
Oh, juggling, yeah, with Mario's face instead of Mr. Game & Watch's face. Yeah, juggling balls. It seems like a neat collector's item. You owned the Game & Watch collection, right, on Game Boy?
I did. It did have the struggling one in it.
And did you play that at all?
I played it. It was very good. I can't find the damn cartridge, but yeah, it was a cool game. It had like that game also had like Manhole, where you're like. Have you ever seen that one where you're...
Yeah, I believe so.
And then there's another one where you're getting like cement up and down a building. Like a Wrecking Crew kind of style thing. Like, yeah, it's a cool collection.
Yeah, it's neat that they're putting this out. It's not something that I'm going to go out and buy because it's just the original Mario Brothers in a neat little thing. But
again, it's one of those things where Nintendo know their audience and how... just ravenous certain aspects of the crowd are for these collectible things, and they know how to make their money.
They do, and they do it well. And there's a bit of we're going to do Mario integrations with other games. So there's going to be Splatoon Splatfest. There's going to be some Animal Crossing furniture, I think they said. So crossovers through their different ongoing Switch titles that have Mario content being added to them as a celebration, which is neat. Maybe it'll get me to jump back into Animal Crossing. Who knows?
And there's like designer clothes and shoes. And
yes, like a merch line.
Everything happening, which is just strange, but I guess is predictable at this stage.
Yeah, no, I mean Mario, he's capital B brand, must capitalize on his notoriety. So that was good. I mean, there was some cool announcements in there overall, but I think as a celebration of the 35th anniversary, I think they could have done a bit more.
It's kind of,
alas.
Maybe I'm just not a big enough Mario fan, is how I kind of felt in some aspects, where we obviously absolutely love the 3D Mario series. Never been quite as hot on 2D personally, but like maybe I'm just not the target audience for a lot of this stuff, but you're right. It just kind of felt a bit flat. Honestly, I think had 64 and Sunshine in particular been remade as part of that collection, I think this would have been a much hotter announcement overall.
Definitely.
Especially personally. Sure. Like, those were maybe one of the most disappointing aspects of this thing. Yeah.
But we're still going to buy them and play them on because we're idiots. So Nintendo, no matter the bad things they do, there's always going to be stupid people like us who are going to give them money. So I guess we can't say shit, can we? So anyway, moving on. Zelda, they put out a trailer again, dropped a random trailer. Hey, Hyrule Warriors is back, and this time it's Breath of the Wild. So yeah, it seems like Aonuma kind of in this video was talking about how the Zelda team has worked much more closely with Koei Tecmo this time in order to work on story stuff for this, because it is ostensibly a prequel to Breath of the Wild in terms of it's talking about what happened pre-Calamity. So the 100 years in the past storyline that you get snippets of in Breath of the Wild, you're now going to get expanded into a full-blown, here's what happened, here's the war that happened with Ganon taking over the castle, and etc. And I think from that perspective, it's kind of exciting. The perspective it's not is it's a Muso, so I don't care about playing it, right? Like, there's like I look at the Urbosa like dodging and like doing the slow mo attack like in Breath of the Wild. I'm like, fuck man, that'd be cool. I'd like to play as Urbosa, but then I think, do I really want to spend 20 hours just mindlessly mashing my way through enemies? And I just don't know, right? I feel conflicted about this because on the one hand, Breath of the Wild, my favorite game of all time, yours as well. Like, it is an unrivaled achievement in game design, and yet I do want more of that world, but I just don't know that I want it enough to play a Dynasty Warriors game, you know?
I'm really intrigued by what reviews will say about this game, because I think there will be a lot of people who are very into Breath of the Wild who think, you know what, I'll give this a go, and I'm interested to see what that crowd think, rather than the people who have already played and enjoyed Hyrule Warriors, who will obviously just be like, yeah, it's great, it's Breath of the Wild, but Hyrule Warriors.
Yeah.
So I kind of want the opinion of the people like us who are more into Breath of the Wild versus the Muso game, and see what they kind of think of it, because it kind of is cool, the idea of playing as Urbosa and Mipha and Rivali, like the idea that what they called the Guardians or something,
Champions, I believe.
Champions, that's the word. Not Guardians, they're the spiders.
They're the things that want to kill you.
Yeah.
That apparently are born from those towers and come out the holes in the tower, which I found very oddly.
Sorry, which towers?
So, you know, the giant, the four kind of pillars in front of the Hyrule Castle, you know?
Yes.
In Breath of the Wild. The trailer shows the Guardians, like, being birthed from the holes in those. They kind of fall out of them in a very weird, like, almost alien type way that just made me feel weird. So yeah, some strange lore being dropped here.
But those, the Guardians are like... They fight for Hyrule, right? They're not...
Well, like, I think that was the idea.
And they get taken over by the Calamity, right?
Potentially, because there is a cutscene, right, of them uncovering one of the Guardians when they're at the castle, maybe? I can't remember.
You're talking about Breath of the Wild?
Yeah, in Breath of the Wild, yeah. Of them, like, excavating them and stuff like that. So, yes, true. I think they are corrupted by Ganon,
right.
By Calamity Ganon.
Because in the trailer for Calamity Ganon, you like see Ganon's hordes of armies, bokoblins, whatever.
Yes,
that's his army.
And like, let's be honest, Dynasty Warriors is the perfect franchise for a giant war happening, because you're going to be just destroying hundreds and hundreds of enemies and just mowing them down. And I think that sense of a giant battle, Dynasty Warriors does do a good job of that.
I'm almost warming to it. Like, I want to play.
Yeah, I know, and I think it helps that there's nothing else from Nintendo coming this holiday. And hey, it's a Zelda thing. So I don't know, man. Am I gonna be tricked into?
I as much as the story is pretty flat in that game, I do love the world and the lore in a weird way. Like,
definitely,
those champions are very cool, and hey, that Urbosa dodge is, you know, that could be fun.
Yeah, it's curious to me that it looks so much like Breath of the Wild. Like, I'm wondering, are they using the engine? Like, is there... Because I'll be honest, I just don't like the aesthetic of Musou games generally. I think Hyrule Warriors was very ugly in a lot of places and texture-wise.
It's kind of merging lots of Zelda styles into one as well, which this game isn't doing at all. Like, it's staying in the Breath of the Wild style, which is more appealing.
Yeah, and they've done it for Persona 5 as well, with Persona 5 Scramble, which also has very much that style to it.
They're just doing all your favorite series and turning them in. This is Breath of the Wild, Fire Emblem, and Persona, and you've not tried one yet.
I've not tried one yet, but is this the thing that pushes me over the edge? I don't know. The Fire Emblem one was super disappointing because the roster of characters was lame. Like, they pulled basically from Awakening and Fates and I think the original, and that was kind of it. And I was like,
well, that was going to happen, I guess.
Where's Hector, motherfuckers? Give Hector his due. Give that man respect. They haven't, alas. Maybe they'll do another one of those. Or maybe they'll just make the Fire Emblem fighting game I've always dreamed of. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, it's Hyrule Warriors, Age of Calamity. It's coming November 20th, which is the day after Cyberpunk. So I don't know if that's going to fly with me. We'll see. But yes, it exists. It's a video game. Nintendo are giving us something. You know, it's not nothing.
They are good at giving us something Zelda every year. Like no
matter what
they know.
They always have to kind of, and I think that's their philosophy, right? They've kind of talked in the past about wanting to keep it in people's minds, like keep franchise awareness going throughout the periods where you don't have a mainline thing coming out. So whether that was Link's Awakening last year or Hyrule Warriors this year, there's always something to keep you engaged with the Zelda franchise. While we wait for the big guns, because that hopefully will be next year with Breath of the Wild 2. Excited for that, but... Anyway, I think that kind of covers all news, all things that were dropped, and I think that's probably going to be like Nintendo turning off the spigot for the rest of this year. I don't expect any more peeps out of them until early 2021, where they might give us a Nintendo Direct again. Who knows?
I think you're probably going to get that January, February Direct, although that never really came until very late this year, right?
Well, we didn't get one this year.
Didn't get one at all.
I don't think we've had a regular Nintendo Direct this entire year. So yeah, I mean, it makes sense. The world's on fire. Literally, look at fucking California. Jesus Christ, the sky is red. The world is burning. But hey, we can play remasters of Mario games, so let's be happy. Anyway, to end on a positive, that's going to do us for the show, everybody. Thank you for listening and coming and joining us here. Speaking of those 3D Mario games, Bally, what is the plan? What are we doing with these 3D Mario games? We're going to do a deep dive on them.
We have been saying how Nintendo's lineup at the moment is pretty sparse, and obviously we've talked about this 3D Mario collection, and I really just wanted a good motivation to pick up this collection. So we thought, you know what we should do? We are a Nintendo podcast after all. We need to replay these games and we need to talk about it. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're both picking up the 3D All-Stars, not 3D All-Stars, 3D Mario All-Stars.
It is 3D All-Stars. It's Mario 3D
They do
All-Stars.
use the phrase All-Stars. We're going to pick it up in this upcoming week, I think it is. And yeah, so for the month of October, we are going to play and talk about Mario 64. And then for the month of November, we're going to play and talk about Mario Sunshine. And then because of Game of the Year clashes, we're probably not going to talk about Mario Galaxy until January 2021. But we just want to shout this out now because we want everyone to hopefully play along or, share your comments on these three games via our email address, ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. Likewise, we're going to start a thread in our Discord server to talk about these three games. And yeah, so the target at the moment is for us at the end of October to talk about Mario 64. So there's lots of ways to play Mario 64. And yeah, we hope you can play along with us, send in your thoughts on that game, and we're going to do a deep dive into all three of these games over the coming months.
Absolutely. It's been so long since I played 64. I think is the one I'm most excited to jump back into because it's been forever, and I would like to get back into it because there's so many of those stars that like burned into my brain either from watching Let's Plays or playing it myself back in the day. So we shall see how that goes. Cool. Well, yeah, do that. You can also find us all over the place on the internet. We have a Patreon at patreon.com/ThisNintendoLife, where you can support us and get bonus episodes of the show, This Nintendo Life, where we talk about Nintendo games and fun things like that. And we'll have another episode of that coming out next week. So if you want to, go over there for $1 a month and can support us to get access to that stuff. It's a fun time. And Bally would like to thank some of our patrons.
Yes, thank you to our $10 tier patrons. They are, of course, Zach S., Atari Alex, Thomas Matthew, and my fiancée Caroline. Thank you all for your $10 tier support. But thank you to all of our other patrons. It's hugely appreciated, especially during these COVID times.
Indeed. Yes, you can also find us over the internet spaces. We are on Twitter. You can find our Twitter for our podcast, which is at TNL Podcast. Go there for updates about Mario stuff. We might do some polls there and things like that, which could be fun. And yeah, go check that out. You can obviously find us on Twitter. I'm at LordNBZ. Bally, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91. That's BALLYMAN91.
Great. You can obviously find the show in various places. We're on iTunes, we're on Spotify, on Stitcher, on any podcasting app that you have. You can ask your Alexa to play us. All good stuff. Easy ways to access the show and listen at your pleasure. You can obviously also help us out by reviewing us on iTunes, and we'd love to get some more of those in. That would be really good and very, very helpful. So if you have a few moments, head over there and review the show. We would appreciate it greatly. And yeah, obviously, email address, Bally, one more time before we go, so people can send in their thoughts on Mario and all that stuff.
ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. That is ThisNintendoLife@gmail.com. And yeah, like you were saying, MBZ, we're going to play Mario 64 first.
Yes, that's probably going to do us. Any other final closing thoughts here, Bally? Any fun things going on in your world? I'm trying to learn skateboard tricks at the moment, failing quite miserably. I think it's going to take me a while to learn how to ollie, but I will maybe get there at some point in time.
Are you aware of a skate park near you?
Yeah, there is one. I haven't gone there yet because I'm scared that I'm going to be embarrassed.
Scared of the teenagers.
I'm very scared of those pro teenagers who are going to just make me look like a terrible noob. Basically,
you gotta go there with a big beatbox and get Skater Boy playing.
Yes, absolutely, and then say hello, fellow kids. How do you do?
And then they'll turn up and be like, "What is this song? I've never heard it in my life."
Yeah, I know.
They're too young for Skater Boy.
No, that makes me so sad. Oh dear. Well, anyway, I'll continue to do that, and we'll see how it goes. But until then, thank you everybody for listening. We'll be back at you in a couple of weeks' time for another episode. Until then, have a good one. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye, folks. The musical interludes used on today's show were Boat Buds from A Short Hike, copyright Adam Grieu 2019, and the Overworld theme from Super Mario Bros. 2, copyright Nintendo 1988.